Happy Tuesday, everybody. Today is July 27th, 2021, and today's guest is co-host of the Headhunters TV, Randy Birdsong. All right. Welcome back to the Fall Podcast. I am your host, Aaron Blasey, and today's episode is 171, and today's is a good one. Today's guest is Randy Birdsong, co-host of Headhunters TV on the Outdoor Channel. Him and Nate have been running Headhunters for the last, I think they're in season 11 now, and they've been doing it at a top-notch level ever since day one. They're very good at what they do, and not only are they good at what they do, they're also really good at whitetail hunting and managing whitetails. So today's podcast is all about a project called the Raven Project. Randy's goal was always to be able to buy a piece of property and be able to make it into what he wanted it to be and form it to have that deer camp aspect and be able to just have great memories, work the ground, manage the deer, and manipulate the deer the way he wants to do it. And he's finally got that opportunity. It's called the Raven Project. It's going to be a digital series, and we get into that today. But we dive into some cool things as far as food, water, cover, like all, the low-hanging fruit, but we also dive into access and entry and intrusion and a whole bunch of stuff that goes along with it, and food plots and what to put in the food plots and all that stuff. This is a really cool podcast. Randy's a super nice dude. I got to meet him quite a few years ago, back probably in 2013, and I just watched him from afar, being, part of Headhunters TV and everything. It's just one of those shows that I always watched and really enjoyed. So go over and check out the Raven Project at their social channels. I look at them on Instagram, so go to Instagram and check out the Raven Project and just follow what they're doing. It's really cool. So I guess with that being said, I'm going to jump over to this interview with Randy and get right into it because it is a good one. All right, welcome back to the Fall Podcast, and today's guest is a familiar face if you are familiar with outdoor television. It is co-host of Headhunters TV, Randy Birdsong. Randy, thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. You and Nate have been doing Headhunters for probably better of 10 years now, haven't you?
Man, we are currently airing our 11th season, believe it or not. It's been a ride.
It has, dude. And you guys have been doing Headhunters at a high level ever since the word jump. Like, you guys, I loved your show from the get. Like, I still love it. Watch it. It's crazy. I love you guys' excitement and all the freaking big animals you kill. I love it, man.
I really appreciate it, man. We got going. I've always kind of had the mindset, if you're gonna come out of the gate, man, you got to come out of the gate swinging. So
yep.
I definitely wanted to, always wanted to have our production at a high level, and I've always kind of been into that side of things as far as the production side and just really managing that side of it. And I don't do the editing ourselves. We've got a couple way more talented guys than me to do that. So
yeah.
But I do enjoy being a part of it and, watching over it, managing it, and just kind of seeing it all come, from field to fruition to what you see on TV. It's a cool process. For sure, man. So in quick, what do you got for this season? I know you guys are running Q3 and 4. Is that what you're doing? Yeah, we do. Well, we do all 4 quarters, but we do our new episodes in Q3. So right now, you're getting all the new stuff, all the new shows coming down the pipe from what we filmed this past fall. Okay.
What days are your anchor spots? Like, when are you guys airing?
Yep. So we do Thursday evenings is our anchor, and that's at 8:30 Eastern.
Okay.
And then we also do, I believe it's like 10 Eastern on Saturdays, and then we've got 3 other airings throughout the week.
They're weird, man.
Those are a couple. Those are the 2 main airings.
Yep. I forget all about our other 2 or 3 airings because the anchor is the only one I really worry about, and it's one's at 3:00 in the morning on a Thursday, and it's I just don't know who's up watching it then.
No doubt.
Yeah. Well, that's cool, man. You guys are doing that stuff, and you guys have been doing it at a high level, like I said, for a long time. But today's podcast, I want to get into something different you're doing, something new, and it's the Raven Project, man.
Yeah, man.
I cannot wait to pick your brain about this, because ever since I seen it come across Instagram and social media, I'm like, what the hell is this? I got to know more. So
yeah, it's a pretty cool project. I'm super excited about it. It's honestly, man, it's like a passion of mine that I've had, forever, and finally kind of getting to bring it to life. It took a long time, and being in the industry and working and kind of, working towards a goal of hopefully one day having our own piece of hunting property. That's always kind of been the end game for me. I mean, that was the ultimate goal, is at some point to have our own piece of property. Wasn't sure where it was going to be at or anything else, but just our own piece of property that we can manage. And, if you know anything about my background, that's kind of where my passion has always been, is managing whitetails, all over the Midwest. And I always kind of had that goal, one day, man. I mean, it's cool managing them for somebody else, and, your leases and different stuff like that, but there's nothing like having your own piece of dirt. And this past spring, we finally got that opportunity here, and actually put together a piece of ground that's within, about 20 minutes of where I live at here in Missouri. So it's kind of right in the back door, which is cool too. But put together a piece of property here, and it was a complete raw piece of ground, man. And whenever I say raw piece of ground, a lot of pieces of property out there that you have, it's had some kind of, improvements done to it, or,
right.
Food plots or clearings or ponds, or, whatever it might be. Whenever I say this piece was a complete raw piece of ground, like it was literally 100% hardwood timber.
No kidding.
So it had nothing done to it yet. And whenever I first, we first got a chance at it, I honestly wasn't even sure how excited or how much interest I had in the particular piece, because of how raw it was. And then I got to really thinking and diving into it, and I said, you know what? Like, this is literally a raw blank slate. When you think about it, I mean, if you've got a piece of ground that's already had clearings done, or it's already had this or that done to it, you can't go back and redo those things. Those things are there.
Right.
Whereas, this piece of ground, literally a blank slate that you could carve out and do whatever you wanted to it. So whenever I really got to thinking about it in that aspect, I was like, man, this is exciting. Like, this could be super cool. And at the time, I didn't have the idea of the Raven Project. And we had, we kind of kicked around for a couple years about doing something digitally, doing a digital project. And, those projects are gaining popularity every day. But I wanted to make sure that we had kind of the right format, the right idea, and just a good concept, before we launched something on that side of things. And after we closed on the Raven, I got to really thinking. I was like, hey, dude, this could work. I mean, this is right up a whitetail hunter's alley, as far as, starting with a blank slate here, and really, showing the audience. And we, with the ability of us having producers and stuff around all the time, I mean, we're documenting every single process that we're doing to this piece of property to make it hopefully what will be the best whitetail property in, our part of the state.
For sure.
And the cool thing is, man, is it's going to be very relatable to the average hunter, because although we're in Missouri, we're in the very southern part of Missouri. So we're not in northern Missouri, where it's known for giant deer. I mean, we're very average when it comes to quality of deer here in the state. So that being said, I mean, we have the chance to grow some nice deer here and there, but we're not known for killing, and growing booners around every corner here. So
right.
it's going to be very cool to be able to see what we can do with this property in this part of the state. And it's going to be very relatable too to the average guy. And and at the end of the day, man, like, that's what we want to be known for, is, we're not claiming to be professional hunters by any means. I mean, we want people to learn from our successes, and also learn from, what will be plenty of failures, I'm sure.
Agreed. Relatability is key. Like being able to take this podcast for instance, I've been working for Chris and Casey for 10 years now and being their producer and their main TV guy. And so I have the TV side, but it's I have 2 pieces of ground in Michigan here that are very one's a 1 acre farm. It's an 80 acre farm, but it's all ag around it. I got a 1 acre piece of timber in it that I've, for the last 6 years have tried to do as much timber stand improvement on it and make it for a buck haven in the rut, man. I get bucks in there that you shouldn't probably be getting in Michigan, just cruising through there in the rut. And that's relatability. Every guy can relate to that. If you can get the right piece of 1 or 2 acres or 5 acres, 10 acres, whatever it had be, you do it the right way, it can be a success.
Yeah, 100%, man. That's the thing is everybody thinks that you've got to have 2,000 acres to be able to do anything. And honestly, man, what it comes down to a lot is how much effort you're willing to put into something.
For sure.
Because you can take just like that, and you made a great point there, but you can take a very, very small, minute piece of ground, and if you put the right steps and the right processes in there and do it up right, there's a lot of stuff that you can do to improve that very small acreage to make it, very attractive to deer. I mean, it's just a matter of, like I said, how much effort you're willing to put into it.
Yep. And to kind of go back, you guys got a blank slate property, and that's huge because not a lot of people can find those anymore. You're not fixing other people's previous ideas. You know what I mean? This is Randy's deal here. This is your footprint. That is so cool and so powerful,
Yeah, that's what I said. I mean, it's so hard, man, to find those places like that because it's, almost every property out there has had at least something done to it, whether, it was the right thing, the wrong thing, whatever, but it's had something done to it. And this particular piece of property, and like I said, I kind of viewed it as a negative thing at first, but then when I really got to thinking about it and got to thinking about how it was a blank slate, I was like, hey, this has got some potential here,
sure.
And then whenever I started thinking about digital projects, I was like, shoot, how much, it don't get much cooler than this to be able to take the audience from, square one all the way through the entire process. Cause this will be a multi-year, that's the other thing is it takes time, man.
Oh yeah.
It'll be a multi-year process to get this thing, kind of where we want it. And then it'll always be kind of a work in progress after that.
For sure. So break it down. You said it's big timber. How many acres is it? How does it lay out?
Yep. So it's, a lot of it is mature timber that's not been cut in probably 40 years. The whole south half is that kind of timber. And then the north half has probably been cut. It's probably been cut 15 to 20 years ago. So it's still got good big timber, but not as virgin. Separate tracks, which was kind of crazy that it lined up that way to be able to put them both together at the same time.
Yep.
But it's like I said, it didn't have any water on it, any water sources at all. So one of the first things that we done was we went in, we got an excavator, bulldozer. We started putting in food plots, and every food plot we put in a water hole. We put in just a very, very small water hole, but we wanted to be able to scatter, water sources throughout that entire property.
Nice.
So that was one of the first things because, at the end of the day, man, you gotta have water to hold wildlife, and it doesn't matter. Those ponds are good for deer. They're good for turkeys. I mean, every piece of wildlife out there will utilize those ponds.
Definitely. You kind of broke up there. Did you say how many acres it was?
No, I didn't. We bought it in two separate pieces. It's about 900 acres.
Okay. So it's a good tract, but, with having mature timber on it like that, that gives you so much flexibility, I feel like, too, because you can either come in and clear it if you want, or select cut it, or there's a lot of different things you can do. You can come do a hinge cut. You can, a lot of people cringe when you hear hinge cut, but you could do a lot of management stuff with that timber to really manipulate deer and what you want them to do.
100%, man. That's kind of the phase that we're on right now, actually, is we we went in and basically, man, on the excuse me, on the upwind side of a lot of these food plots, we went in and we done 1 acre to 2 acres of hinge cutting. And we kind of strategically, we looked at the maps. We wanted to do them on, what would be south or east facing slopes.
Yep.
Off of, 150 yards, 200 yards off these food plots, because my goal is I want to get them. I want to get those bedding areas established close enough to those food sources that we can utilize the daylight activity. They're going to be close enough to get up and utilize those plots in the daylight. But we're going to still be bedding them just far enough to where we can still access those plots without blowing our deer out.
Yeah.
So
how close are you putting those to the plots? Like, what is too close in your mind?
Man, a lot of it just depends on kind of the terrain that you're dealing with. But I don't like to get them closer than about 100 yards for sure.
Okay. Yep.
I think 150 yards is kind of the sweet spot in there.
Yep.
In my opinion. And like I said, a lot of that depends on how your ground lays, how the roll of your ground is. But you've got to be able to get in and out of those plots without being busted. I mean, that's the thing is, it's cool to have your deer super close, but you can have them too close as well.
For sure. What is your game plan as far as how to hunt these deer? Like, is it kind of sit back from a distance, let them kind of do their thing, do deer things, do big buck things, whatever that might be, hunt them off food? Or, like, I know it's very situational when it comes to that, but, like, in a perfect world, what is your philosophy in that?
Man, for me, I've always been huge on not diving deep into the timber until it's absolutely right. There's only about a 3-week window in the entire year that I'll go deep into the timber. And, that's usually from the 25th of October through the 15th or 20th of November. Outside of that, pretty much the way I hunt them is I'll rely on trail cameras and just setting back and observing from, long distances on big plots and stuff until it's right. And then kind of try to move in and strike on what I'm seeing.
Yep.
I don't like beating the interior of that timber up, man, until it's right. I just feel like you do more damage than good. And by the time it gets right, you put so much human intrusion on everything that you don't get that natural movement that you normally would.
For sure. And you've hunted all over the country, whitetails, elk, mule deer, you name it. I mean, you've done a lot. And in my philosophy, I hate bumping deer. It doesn't matter what state I'm in. You could be in Iowa in the least, populated county. I still do not like to bump deer.
It cringes. It makes me cringe, man.
Yeah, it does. So I totally, I'm with you on that. Like, I like to sit from a distance and just, if you have the time, sit back and gradually move in if you have to, and strategically just strike.
Yep, absolutely. And a lot of times that's, a prime example is, one of the deer I shot last year here in Missouri. That's exactly what we did on that deer is, we had a big 4 or 5 acre food plot that was kind of ran long and skinny. It was probably 400 yards long. We started on the very end of that food plot observing, more than anything. And we got to noticing where this deer was coming out and kind of what he was doing. And we got to noticing that he would eventually work his way all the way down to where we were at, but it would be after camera light before he got there. So what we did is we seen what he was doing. We got the wind right. We bumped up about 300 yards, hung a stand, and cut him off to where, he obviously then he come by us within, good daylight, and we were able to get a shot at him. But that's kind of my, I do that a lot because I feel like if you try to jump too soon, man, more times than not, you end up on the wrong side of a deer or he does something, completely different, and then you end up bumping him, and that might be the only chance you get at that deer.
Yeah.
So I don't know, in my opinion, it's if you got the time, it's way better to play it safe and play it slow and just inch in on them.
Yeah. Now, when you're moving in like that, I know you've always got a producer with you. You got twice the gear, twice the stands, twice the people. So it's like when you're moving in, are you hanging and hunting right away? Like, are you getting in that
I do,
night?
man. I literally, usually, I don't like to make multiple trips in there. Most of the time, what we'll try to do is we'll drive the buggy or the truck right to the tree, dump out all the stuff. I'll go park the buggy or the truck, and then we'll come back and hang it and jump right in it, because I just feel like that's the that's the least intrusion that you're going to have. I hate making multiple trips in and out. You're leaving multiple boot trails, and just it's just less intrusion that way.
Yep. How are you thinking, kind of jumping around here, I just had a thought about your entry and exit. How are you, when you're breaking down a piece of ground like this and you're really trying to manipulate what, your entry and exit, like how are you picking out stand locations? Is the first thing you're looking at is how the hell am I going to get in or out of here before you put a stand in?
Yeah, I think the first thing you got to think about it always is access, because if you can't, the thing about it is you can have the best tree in the whole farm, but if every time you go in and out of there, you're bumping deer, you're just spinning your wheels, because you've got it more times than not. It's going to take you more than one time to get a deer killed. And, if you go in the first time and you bump everything out of there and all of a sudden now you have no more natural movement because they're moving off of your intrusion now, then you're just bouncing around playing ping pong at that point.
Right.
So that's 100%, man. Like I'll look and I'll get a general idea of where I need to be at. And then I'll start kind of, micro breaking it down into how do I, exactly what tree do I need to get in and what tree can I get in with, being able to make the least amount of intrusion while doing so. And then I'll get into that spot and then I'll hunt it. And then if once I kind of get in there and see, because the thing about it is too, man, is like you can only learn so much off of looking at a map. I mean, when you're looking at a map, you're kind of getting the 10,000 foot above scenario, right? And then, that's a good starting spot. But once you get in there and you actually seeing with your own two eyes exactly how things are moving, what the deer are doing, at that point, you can kind of start fine tuning that game plan, and you at that point what you think you can get by with and what you can't.
Yep. Yeah, e-scouting and maps only can get you so far. Like
it's a good starting. Yes. It's a good starting place,
Shit, I got a farm here in Michigan. My dad's been hunting since the 70s. It's in my family. It's 218 acres. I've been hunting it since I was little, and I still look at maps all the time because I don't know, maybe I just geek out on it, but get you in this area.
And I think every time you look at them too, you learn something different. You see something different.
For sure.
I don't think there's, I think maps are a huge part of everything. I mean, like I said, I think that should be always your first go to, no matter what you're doing.
Definitely. Now, with this ground that you have, do you know that there's already segmented areas that you're like, okay, this is a rut hole, or this is just going to be like October, early season? I know a lot of people have that, but are you trying to stay out of certain areas until the right time, you think?
Yeah, I'm pretty strategic on where we're hunting at early on. I mean, I think I try to pick the most accessible places, the easiest accessible places early on, just because that's where you're going to get the least amount of intrusion. And I mean, at the end of the day, basically whenever I think about it, our end goal is to get as many quality hunts as we can throughout the year without intruding any more than we have to. Because I know that, if we can keep our intrusion down, we're going to get more quality hunts throughout the year than what we would if we try to push the envelope early on and start bumping things around early.
Yep, definitely.
And that's kind of how I guess that's kind of, if there's a particular deer, it's so situational. I guess it's not, I hate to say that it's just completely one way, because I'm not going to say that, I'm constantly monitoring trail cameras throughout the year. And I think, like I was saying earlier, I think that's one of the things probably early on, especially, that I rely on the most is if I see something consistent and I think I can get in there and get that deer shot, without making much effort or intrusion, I'm going to go after him while he's consistent. I mean, that's at the end of the day, man, there's no better odds in your favor than going in and hunting a deer that's consistent at the time, because he's not going to stay that way forever.
Right.
So you gotta strike on those. You gotta strike on those opportunities like that too, because like I said, that a lot of times you're going to have a short window. It might be, it might be 3 days, it might be 7 days, but I can tell you it's not going to be forever. And, when you see a deer, a target buck that you're wanting to try to hunt, and he's doing something that he shouldn't be doing every day in daylight, you got to take advantage of it.
How many times do you have to see that to be like, I got to get in now? Like, is it 3 times or?
Man, yeah. I mean, if I see a deer doing the same thing, 2 or 3 days in a row, it's time, because, that window could, it's not a cut and dried window that you say, okay, well, he's going to do that 10 days in a row. I mean, he might go in there and he might not ever do it again. But if I see him doing it 2 or 3 times and it's, he's in a good spot where I can get in and out, the wind's right, he's in there in the daylight, I'm going in, and I'm going to give it 2 or 3 days, because you might go in there on the 3rd day after he's been in there 2 different days. He might not show that day. That's just a big deer being a big deer.
Yeah.
I mean, they're, it's like I said, there's not anything cut and dried about killing a big mature deer. I mean, you got to be flexible with them, because at the end of the day, I mean, they don't always know exactly what they're doing from one time to the next either.
I know it. Sometimes I feel like deer are kind of like caribou. They just don't know where they're going until they get there.
Exactly.
But, in all your endeavors and all your hunts and everything, if you think back, do you remember a deer or a buck that has been like so consistent that it's like, yep, I know he's going to be here at this time? Like, do you remember a time like that?
Man, I'd have to think about it. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been some over the years, especially out west. I mean, that's where I really like to pattern them. As far as whitetail goes, it seems like those deer out there, they're just slaves of their stomach, man. And there's so much more. There's so much more patternable out there, because they've got one food source, and they're on that food source every single day of their life.
Yeah.
And out there, it just seems like it's just a matter of making sure that you're patient enough to where you don't push the envelope and you wait until things are right. And usually, if you do, you'll capitalize on it.
That's key too. I mean, patience. If you don't have patience, that can be a detriment to what you're doing. So I guess like in your scenario, how do you stay patient? Like, what are some things that you have to do to be like, man, I just cannot go in right now, even though I want to so bad?
I honestly, man, I think it's just the fact of looking back over the years and seeing all the mistakes that you've made, and finally at some point in your career, you realize that, hey, look, I've outgrown this phase of my life. I'm not gonna run in there as bad as I want to when I know it's not right, because I know if I wait a day or two, things are going to get right, conditions are going to get right, and I know the odds are going to be in my favor then, because it is truly incredible how you can put the odds in your favor if you do have patience. And what I mean by that is it so many times it would be so easy and so tempting. Whenever you see a deer doing a particular thing and he's in a good spot, but the conditions aren't right, you gotta have some self-discipline not to run in there, because it's tough, man. I mean, that's a tough game there. But, like I said, after years upon years of hunting them and looking back at your mistakes and looking back at the outcomes of those hunts whenever you done that versus whenever you waited until things got right, then you can kind of start seeing, okay, it makes way more sense to give it another day or two until things get right, and then the odds are going to be incredibly higher.
Yep.
I think it's just a matter of just doing that over the years and kind of learning what works and what doesn't.
Evolving too, like you said. I mean, when I was 25 years old, I just ran through the woods like rampant, really just kind of. But now being 34 and a little more mature, and I took up basket weaving too, so that kind of takes up a lot of my time. No, I didn't.
It really does well on the patience too.
Yeah. No, you do grow though. You are right. You grow, you mature a little bit more, and it's more like I got to make a better decision.
You slow down. I feel like the older you get, you kind of start making more meticulous moves than just sporadic moves.
For sure.
I think when it comes to big deer, I mean, I think that the more strategic moves that you can make and the less sporadic ones that you can make, the higher your success is going to go.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Now, when you have, let's say you have a deer pinpointed, you got a buck that you've been chasing all year, you got one pinpointed, he's daylighting. Are you, like, if you know where he's bedding, let's say you have a good idea where he's bedding, are you trying to get in as tight as possible, or are you still kind of like holding back a little bit?
I think it just kind of depends on it depends on what time of year it is, and it depends on what I'm seeing him doing. If he's hitting a particular food source, I'm not worried about trying to push in on him, because at the end of the day, it's cool and all to get as close as you can get to him, but you got to remember that whenever you do that, that's a very, very risky move, because at the end of the day, we don't ever know 100% where he's bedded unless we physically laid eyes on
For
him
sure.
laying his head down. And a lot of times I've seen, and I've been guilty of this too, is like you think you know where he's bedded, and then you make one wrong move and you take one extra step and you blow him out of the country.
Yep.
So I think that if you can get, I like hunting them on food sources somewhere that they're already naturally coming to.
Yep.
Without having to push the envelope. That's where I think that you're gonna be the most successful, and you're going to be the least amount intrusive to that deer, and you're going to get more chances at him, because you're hunting him on his terms basically rather than yours.
For sure. Now, going to food sources, now that you have the Raven and you're basically you're designing this whole thing, what is like the perfect size food source that you like to make? If it's a food plot, like how big is it? Is it a certain shape? Like, I know it depends on the lay of the land and everything, but like in a perfect world, what are you trying to do with your food sources?
Yeah, I think, if you look across the map on what we've done, I think the majority, we're probably in that acre and a half or so is the average. But we've got some little micro plots that might only be a quarter to half acre, and then we've got 3 or 4 bigger sources that are 4 to 5 acres. So I think it's good to have a good mix, because what you got to think about too is what you're going to be putting into those plots. For us, our deer density is pretty high here, so I wanted to have 3 or 4 bigger plots that if we wanted to go in there and drill beans in the spring and summer, there's going to be enough acreage there to be able to sustain the amount of deer that we have.
Yep.
So, but as far as what is ideal to hunt over, I like those plots that's closer to an acre in size.
Yeah.
And mostly,
go ahead. Well, what I was going to say is, like, having those plots that are an acre or so, a half acre, I like to be able to shoot the whole plot if you can. If something comes in there, I like to be able to, if it's a 40-yard shot or so, I'd like to be able to make that. So that's kind of where my head's at, and that's why I asked you. I didn't know if it was a certain shape that you wanted, like a little hourglass or like a bottleneck or something. Are you trying to manipulate them, or I like to be able to shoot as much as I can.
Yeah, and we normally always we kind of try to construct them to where they've either got a pinch in them, or a lot of the ones that we actually use those water holes as the pinch. So
okay,
a lot of ours would almost be kind of boomerang shaped or horseshoe shaped with the the pond right in the the bottom of the horseshoe.
Yep.
So if a deer comes through there, basically he's within 40 yards if he comes through the plot there from one side to the other of being pinched by that pond.
Yeah. With making water holes like that and hunting over water holes, when you put those in, did you see like a huge shift or a huge difference in like the deer movement and the daylight sightings?
Honestly, I didn't really have anything to compare it with there, because we had never been on that place before. So as soon as we got it, we started constructing water holes. So I really didn't have a before and after comparison on that particular place.
Gotcha. Okay. I was just curious because, it's nice to have food, not food, water. Water's great to have, and just to have, like, I've put a couple 50-gallon drums, like, cut in half, like, right in the ground, and I get deer drinking out of them all the time here in daylight. I just haven't seen, like, it's more of like they're coming to the food source and then they're just going to take a drink when they're at the food source. It's not like they're coming there right for the water. So I was just curious.
Yeah, and they're good. They're super good too. A lot of something too that people don't think about is as far as on the turkey side of things. But that's one reason too that we put so many in and scattered them throughout the farm, is because, especially, when those turkeys are nesting, they got to have water. And a lot of times those hens won't nest unless, they can be within 400 or 500 yards of a water source. So
Really? I didn't know that.
yeah, that's something else too, that, one reason why we wanted to have as many as we've had, and hopefully it's going to improve our turkeys as well.
Now, did you ever have, going into making I keep saying food, water, going into making water sources, did you ever have like the fear of, man, if I put more water in, that might create more EHD with the midge, how they like to be around water, that little bug and all that? Like, did you ever have that fear?
Well, I mean, as far as our property goes, we're pretty rocky. We got a pretty rocky base.
Okay.
So a lot of times, and we're up a little bit higher elevation. More times where you have, the issues with the EHD is the more, mud, kind of the mud bottom streams and tributaries and stuff like that. This particular part of the country, we're almost all rock bottom in all of our streams and stuff. So we'll have, a touch of EHD here and there, but we don't get affected as much as what they do in like northern Missouri and southern Iowa and that area.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense. I was just curious, like our Illinois farm, it's a lot of the same of what the Raven is. It's a blank slate that Casey and I are doing a lot of improvements on, and it's really cool to see that. But we were talking about, we had a little bit of fear with, maybe presenting the opportunity for more EHD to possibly come. We didn't want to do that. There are some water sources on the farm, but it's just one of those things that was in the back of the head that I was like, man, we got to tread lightly there maybe. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on it too.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people overlook that soil type and that, when you're talking about EHD and those midge flies. But in my experience, there's a huge difference there in what you see EHD wise, depending on, what kind of soil type you have and the amount of rock that you have.
Yep, I gotcha. So going back to food, what did you have a certain ratio that you wanted food per, yada yada, whatever that might be, and how did you figure out how much food you wanted to put in?
Man, it's always it's another one of them situations to where it's not completely cut and dried. It's kind of I don't know. I guess it's kind of a learning curve to a certain extent, because you obviously want to have enough food to last you throughout the year to be able to hold deer, on your property. That's got to be that's the ultimate goal.
Right.
And then when you start thinking about hunting these food sources, I try to. My biggest thing is I don't want to have two or three of the same kind of food plots in the same area. And that being said, the reason for that, I don't want to spread a particular deer and give him multiple options at certain times of the year, because that's only going to make him harder to hunt. If that makes sense.
Yep.
So whenever I really look at my farm, I try to break it down into kind of quadrants, and I want to have something for each particular time of the year in that quadrant, but I don't want to have multiple food sources of the same thing.
Gotcha. That makes total sense, though, too, because it's fun. What makes deer so fascinating to me is their body tells them what they need at that moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and exactly. Like if I'm looking at the northeast quadrant of our farm, and it's, the 20th of October, and I've got a shooter up there that's been pretty consistent, that I know he's up there and I want to hunt. I don't want to have three different radish plots up there. I want to have one, because I want to know that whenever I go to that one, if he's going to come into a radish plot, that's where he's coming.
Right.
And that time of year, I know that that's probably what he's going to be looking for. So, I kind of use that to my advantage, and you can really narrow them down by doing that.
Yeah. If you had a perfect world, what is your favorite plot, like type of plot to hunt over? What's in it?
Man, I really, we plant a lot of big tine, and the long range blend is a radish blend that I really love. I love the radishes, because number one, a lot of people too, and when people ask me, hey, what do I need to plant? Well, the first question I ask is, well, when are you planning on hunting over it?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of guys just, they just randomly pick something, but they don't really think of the time of year that they're really, planning on hunting. And that has such a big role in what you plant. So, for me, I love that radish blend because of the majority of what we do in Missouri here is going to be from the 15th of October to the 15th of November. So, that window, our deer just hammering those radish blends.
I got you. So when is typically like the radish? I haven't planted any radishes. So how does a radish, how's the frost affect a radish? Is it killing right off, or how does that work?
They won't withstand cold and frost like a turnip does.
Okay.
And that's why on the radishes you got a shorter window. The turnips, the frost will turn the leaves into sugar, and later on in the year they actually get better to where your radishes they'll quit. What they'll do is they'll quit eating the leaves part of it. They'll still eat the actual radish part, but they'll slow down on the leaves after the middle part of November.
Yep, I gotcha. And that makes perfect sense, because then you could, do you do, let's say you have a radish plot, are you putting different types of food in one plot, or is it just a radish plot is a radish plot?
It just kind of depends on the plot. A lot of our bigger ones, we'll split them up and we'll have 2 or 3 different things in that particular plot. If it's an acre plot or something like that, usually we're only planting one particular thing.
Yep, I gotcha. I like the fact that you're really breaking down your food sources and only giving them one, not necessarily one option. You're giving them multiple options, but like you said, you don't want 3 different types of radishes up there, because how the hell do you know which one to pick?
You don't. And that's the thing is, and a lot of guys overlook that, but a mature deer is hard enough to kill. They're hard enough to narrow down and kill as it is. Like you don't want to give them any more opportunity to outsmart you than you have to. And the more you can narrow that deer down, obviously, the higher percentage you're going to have in your favor. So that's what I'm constantly looking at whenever I'm, designing farms. If I'm designing, food plots, picking out what I'm planting in food plots. I mean, that's all stuff that plays such a huge role that a lot of guys overlook.
It's almost like having a big stand of oaks and you're in a big timber setting. Like, what oak tree do you go when it's a mass crop that year?
Exactly.
It's like you're throwing a dart at the wall and just like, I'm gonna pick this.
You don't want to spread them out any more than you have to. You know.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, with your population problem, you said you're pretty overpopulated with deer. Like, how are you guys managing your herd?
Yep. So last year was kind of a learning curve for us, because last year was the first year on there. So we actually didn't shoot any does on our place last year, because we wanted to kind of give it a one season kind of overall of hunting it, kind of, running trail cameras throughout the whole year, and just kind of get a good idea of what we had, and then be able to make a plan going into this, this second year off of what we saw. So Missouri, where we're at here, makes it a little bit tough to manage your does, because like as far as gun wise, we only get one doe tag.
Okay.
So, but with bow, we can shoot unlimited does with, however many tags you buy. So this year our plan is to go in, and we'll probably try to, off this particular place, we'll probably try to shoot about 20 does this year.
Okay.
Just off of kind of what we saw off the trail cameras, what we saw hunting, and just that's kind of where we think that we need to be. And that's, that's a little bit of a sliding scale too. I mean, it's not exact where it'd be hard to go in there and say, okay, well, we need to shoot 19 does. That's exactly the right amount.
Right.
It's a little bit of a a learning curve on that side of things too. And I mean, we usually try to shoot a little bit under where we think we need to be. And then, the next year, if we feel like we didn't shoot enough, then we'll try to go in and shoot more the next year.
Yep. And that's the funny thing with that, with the does and everything. It's kind of a fine line. Like, you don't want to go in there and just eradicate them, Right. So it's like, what do you do?
Yeah. And you kind of got to manage for what you like too. I mean, at the end of the day, it's, if it's your property, there's no exact way that you ought to do it one way or the other. I mean, a lot of guys like to see a lot of deer. If you're into seeing a lot of deer, then obviously you don't want to shoot as many does.
Right.
You know, if you're into holding more mature deer, then you probably need to shoot more does and be good with not seeing as many deer.
Yep.
So it's kind of, you almost got to write that prescription as far as, you know, to your liking, because it's, you know, it's only right to, it's only exactly right to the person that believes in that prescription. Right. So, it just kind of depends on what you're into.
So many different philosophies, and that's the thing too.
Exactly.
Like, I like to be able to have deer respond to calls in the rut, you know, in the rut phases and everything like that. So when you got a lot of does, there's too much competition. My family farm here in Michigan, they don't respond to calls very much because the does are just overtaking the bucks. So I like to, that's my personal prescription, if you want to call it. But I do know there are people out there that when they don't see deer, it's boring. You know, they just want to see deer. Then you get the guys that want to see deer, but then they want to see big deer also. So it's like you got this fine line of like, what do you do?
Yep, exactly. And then you get, you know, a lot. I've heard a lot of it's like, well, you know, we don't want to shoot any does because we won't have any rut. We won't have any rutting activity if we shoot all the does. And that couldn't be further from the truth. You know, what happens so many times, man, and we see it here on our properties, some of our properties, that's, you know, the density's out of whack. You have so many does coming in heat at the same time that you get so many of your deer locked down that you hardly have any kind of rut. Like, there's literally hardly zero movement whenever that lockdown hits, because all of your deer are just, they're locked down.
Yeah.
So whenever when you cut those doe numbers down to where all of a sudden you have half as many does as what you had, and you still have the same amount of bucks, well, now all of a sudden you've got extra bucks out cruising and still rutting, looking, chasing, seeking. You know, you get a better rut when that density is that doe density is lower.
For sure. And my favorite one is, well, if I shoot does, then that's a lot less buck fawns than I'll have. But what they don't understand is when a doe has a buck fawn, that doe in a high percentage is going to kick that buck away, because that's how incest gets, you know, so there's no incest.
You can't be having the inbreeding going on, man.
Exactly. They're going to get kicked away. And then that buck, I mean, he could come back, but that doe more than likely is going to make sure her buck fawn is gone, that he doesn't see her.
Right.
You know, so I'm all for the doe management, kill them, you know, and meat in the freezer, and it makes things, like you said, in the rut, it's a harder rut, you know.
Yeah, you're going to get a more powerful rut. You're going to get better daylight movement, better movement in general.
For sure. Yeah. Well, hey, we're coming up on time here. I got a couple more things I want to get into. You know, I've been watching your stuff on Instagram and social and everything, and I see this little cabin that you guys have on there. I got to know about this little cabin. Like, tell me about the cabin.
Yeah, man. So we don't have a $500,000 lodge here, like a lot of guys do. It's way, way, way far from it. We actually have what we call the Rat Shack. And the Rat Shack consists of about a 500 square foot slab cabin that was built like in the 70s.
Okay.
And not only is it a rat shack, but it actually is a rat shack. Like, it has its own pack rat that lives in it that we call Splinter. So that's kind of where the name the Rat Shack come from.
So there's actually a rat that lives there.
There is a huge ass rat that lives in there.
Do you have any plans of getting him out of there?
Well, you know, we kind of set out to get him, but then we kind of felt bad because he's kind of the mascot of the camp. So we ain't sure now that we want to get rid of him. We might just let him live his best life in there.
I love that you named him Splinter. That is great.
But yeah, it's cool, man. It's you know, at the end of the day, I always kind of thought that I'd want this big extravagant lodge, but man, when you sit around a campfire right there in that setting, I mean, it truly is, man. It's like we all of us grew up in, and
yeah.
As far as going to deer camp and stuff like that, I mean, it still has that feel, so it's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, I love that feel. I grew up, you know, in Michigan here. We've got a deer camp here on our family farm. I love that atmosphere. You know,
that's what it's all about, and that's kind of what we want to show. You know, I mean, as far as what we're doing with the Raven Project is, we want kind of half of that project to be educational, around what we're doing with the management side of things and, the food plot and the land and everything else. But the other half of that is, we want to show what we do on a day-to-day basis as far as, hanging out in deer camp and just all the camaraderie and the fun that goes along with that. I mean, that's, at the end of the day, that's who we are. That's how we grew up. And that's what we want to be able to portray.
That's awesome, man. So kind of give everybody like when they can start seeing this stuff unfold on digital, like where to find it and when things are going to start coming out.
Yep. So we're going to kick off on Waypoint TV, and that'll be, I believe, August the 2nd will be the first episode. And then once we start unfolding the episodes, we'll have, either a premiere episode or a short episode coming every couple weeks. It'll be on Waypoint. It'll be on Realtree 365, MOTV, YouTube. It'll be on several different platforms.
Nice, man. So, and you guys for Headhunters are going to be on Outdoor Channel like normal, right?
Yep. Yeah, we'll continue on Outdoor Channel with Headhunters.
Cool, man. Well,
Yes,
dude,
sir.
I appreciate you coming on and doing this. So much information. There's more questions I have for you, but we might have to do a part 2 on this.
Yeah, man, no problem. I enjoyed it, and I really appreciate you guys having me. It's been awesome.
Thank you very much, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Yes, sir. Bye-bye.
All right, there you have it. Thank you very much, Randy, for coming on and doing this podcast. It is greatly appreciated. Also, going to remind everybody, thank you for the support, but go to iTunes, leave a 5-star rating, and leave a written review. That'd be greatly appreciated. And don't forget, we'll be right here next week on the Fall Podcast.